The NFL wasted no time throwing the book at Texans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair for his hit on Trevor Lawrence this past Sunday. The NFL suspending Al-Shaair for 3 games, meaning if he doesn't get his suspension reduced, the Texans will miss Al-Shaair against the Miami Dolphins, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Baltimore Ravens, 3 teams where Al-Shaair would be really useful for the defense. Let's talk about the suspension. The NFL took sort of a 3-pronged approach to coming up with 3 games. They suspended Al-Shaair 3 games, it seems, for the hit, his history, and his actions after the hit. In the memo released by the NFL, and with the words of NFL Vice President of Football Operations John Runyon, they talked about Azeez Al-Shaair had multiple offenses for personal fouls and sportsmanship-related rules violations in recent seasons. They also said that they felt like Trevor Lawrence was clearly down, clearly sliding, and that Al-Shaair led with his forearm and helmet to the head-neck area when he had, quote, time and space to avoid such contact. I don't totally agree with their understanding of the physics of the situation, but the NFL threw the book at Al-Shaair for a game for the hit. Then, after the illegal hit, as you can read here, he proceeded to engage in a brawl, which the Jaguars started, but then he escalated, according to the NFL. He escalated it, pulled a player down by his face mask, did not leave the field in a timely manner, incited another brawl. But this was the strong language that I felt like we could have done without here in the memo from the NFL. Your lack of sportsmanship and respect for the game of football and all of those who play, coach, and enjoy watching it is troubling and does not reflect the core values of the NFL. Your continued disregard for NFL playing rules puts the health and safety of both you and your opponents in jeopardy and will not be tolerated. So the NFL came down hard on Al-Shaair. He can appeal the suspension. Kevin Mawai, a former NFL center, Ramon Foster, Jordy Nelson, former Packers wide receiver, and Derek Brooks, former NFL linebacker, are the potential arbiters that can hear the suspension appeal for Azeez Al-Shaair. And he should appeal this suspension. I felt like it was going to be 2 games brought back down to 1 game because Al-Shaair has never been suspended before. The 3 games in the NFL's reasoning, I could see how they arrived at 3 games. His history, he previously grabbed Tom Brady by the throat. He's had some unsportsmanlike conduct penalties this year, including a late hit out of bounds against Tennessee. He also had the punch on the sidelines against the Chicago Bears, and now this. So if you want to call that a history and that added a game into the conversation, I certainly see where the NFL's coming from. I don't know if that's some sort of laundry list to the point where you would think about, hey, we got to add a game to this thing because this guy's doing this all the time. I mean, a quarterback or a ball carrier getting hit a little bit out of bounds, I don't feel like that's some sort of malicious, terrible thing. And that hit wasn't a really big one against Tennessee. And he already paid a fine for the Chicago situation where he punched the player on the sideline. So how many times does the NFL get to dip into the punishment well on some things that happen on the field and around the field? So that to me was a little bit much. But if you wanted to say, hey, 2 games, 1 game for the hit and 1 game for how he acted after the hit, I probably would have been on board with that. And because he's never been suspended before, I know the NFL talked about the history for Azeez Al-Shaair. If he's never been suspended before, I would then lower it to 1 game. He faces a 1-game penalty. He already missed half of a game, a little bit more because of the hit. So I feel like he doesn't get any time served for that in this 3-game suspension either. So that doesn't really jive with me. And again, the NFL just stating that Trevor Lawrence clearly had slid and was finished sliding, and that Azeez Al-Shaair clearly had time to stop himself and avoid that. I don't agree with that sentiment. I believe Al-Shaair was going to physically contact Trevor Lawrence no matter what. Now, did the forearm shiver with the braced up forearm to Trevor Lawrence's upper body? Is that sort of the thing that kind of pushes it over the edge from, hey, contact that happens because a quarterback slid and a linebacker couldn't stop himself, to more malicious, to where the NFL feels like they need to not only kick him out of the game, but suspend him? I certainly understand the NFL's line of thinking from that standpoint as well. 3 feels like too much. I don't agree with the history element of this, and I don't agree that you can add that on to already 2 games, for one for the hit and one for how he acted leaving the field. That doesn't jive with what I expected out of this punishment from the NFL. And of course, he already missed more than half a game, getting ejected for the hit. So it doesn't feel like he gets any time served on that either. How does this affect the Houston Texans? How does this change the way that they operate? Well, you think about 3 teams that you would want Azeez Al-Shaair playing. It's the Miami Dolphins, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's the Baltimore Ravens. I think ahead to Derrick Henry on Christmas Day, and Azeez Al-Shaair would be a huge piece of slowing down or trying to stop Derrick Henry. But even these next 2 matchups, Jonnu Smith has gotten going for the Miami Dolphins. Their tight end, that's a guy that can live and eat over the middle against opposing defenses. And Al-Shaair would be a guy that would have been tasked with slowing down and trying to stop Jonnu Smith. And then, of course, we know what Kansas City brings to the table from a tight end perspective. Travis Kelce is very good still. They've gotten some production from some other tight ends over the course of the past couple of weeks that Azeez Al-Shaair patrolling the middle would be helpful against the Kansas City Chiefs as well. The players set to fill in for him: Devin White, Neville Hewitt, Henry To'o will be the linebackers that they lean on the most. And then, of course, Christian Harris is a possibility. Harris hasn't practiced or played since last year. He had half, maybe that'd be generous, of a training camp practice before an injury kept him out for the rest of training camp. He's been designated to return since the season began, but again, hasn't practiced. His practice window has not been opened. He hasn't been on the practice field with the Texans. Maybe he's back after the bye week and they can get him on the field, and maybe they could accelerate some of what Christian Harris has to do to get him on the field in the absence of Azeez Al-Shaair. But Neville Hewitt and Henry To'o can hold it down, with Devin White helping them out as well for a little bit. But you'd prefer to have Azeez Al-Shaair in this matchup that you're going to have against the Miami Dolphins, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, if it gets reduced from 3 games to 2 games, Al-Shaair will be back against the Baltimore Ravens. You'll have him to face Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, that rushing attack that they've got there in Baltimore that's coming to town for Christmas Day. You'll have Al-Shaair there to help out and help slow down the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Baltimore run game experience if he can get that suspension moved from 3 games to 2 games, which I believe the NFL should do. I believe the NFL should reduce this from 3 games to 2 games. He's already missed a game and a half, or half a game, a little over half a game, because he got ejected. And if you want to say, hey, his hit and how he acted, that's worth a game each, I'd be okay with that as far as the suspension. I don't believe that the history, and having already paid for some of the things in his history, I don't believe that the history should rise to adding a 3rd game to the equation. It's 3 games right now. It can be appealed and moved to 2 games if Azeez Al-Shaair wins his appeal against the NFL, a former NFL player that has been jointly appointed by the NFL and the NFLPA will rule over that. And if it gets moved down from 3 games to 2 games, then the Texans will only have the Neville Hewitt, Henry To'o, and Devin White experience for 2 matchups, which would be the Miami Dolphins at home, the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. And you would get Azeez Al-Shaair back for that Christmas Day game against the Baltimore Ravens. And if he misses the Christmas Day game because he loses his appeal, then the Houston Texans will not have him for that Christmas Day matchup. He'll return against the Tennessee Titans. And if the Texans, which they are likely to do, win the division, he'll play in the playoffs against whoever the Texans host in the first round of the playoffs. What say you? The NFL too harsh with the suspension of Azeez Al-Shaair? Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and appreciate you watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.